I looked at my wife of 5 years and said, "Erin, it's either him or me. No in-between options." She's sitting next to my nominal boss, Plato Giannis, and until I spoke, she was holding his well-manicured hand. And then she took her hand away. A look of mingled confusion and fear appeared on her beautiful face. She shook her head in surprise, making her blonde hair glisten in the lamplight. "Just for the weekend. Everything will be back to normal on Monday. Can't you have fun with Elle in the meantime?" Elle is Elle Logan, real name Ellen Johnson. She's sitting next to me and has been making very intense attempts to seduce me for the past few hours. She is a stunning woman with gorgeous dark hair and a body that is one of the best in the world, especially if you like curves, which I certainly like. She is also rumored to be a high-class escort. It's all part of Plato's joke. When Erin and I were invited to this island for the weekend, it was assumed that he just wanted to get to know me better. I'm a famous author, and he bought the corporation that published my work. This happened about 3 months ago. But really, the whole weekend was organized so Plato could screw my wife. I'm a middle-grade writer of detective novels and thrillers. My hero is Rick Rocker. Sometimes he solves the mysteries of locked rooms, and sometimes he dives off cliffs to escape the crazies. He also has a varied and interesting sex life, bedding beautiful women in no time. He is a martial arts expert and a trained assassin. In short, a jack of all trades. He is fantasy-clothed in a thin shell of reality, and the books sell well. But the publisher has some more important and better-selling writers. I just have a beautiful wife that Plato has taken a fancy to. They met at a gala dinner with dancing that Plato, Mr. G, threw for his stable of writers and editors. The party was impressive, and Erin was impressed. She was especially impressed when she and Mr. G danced to a few musical numbers. He is a burly man, 10 years older than 28-year-old Erin. He has long dark hair and is a large man, 5'8" and weighing 95 pounds. As I watched them dance, I saw that he was also agile in his movements. When the group took a break, both returned to our table and Mr. G said, "You have a beautiful wife, Donald, and a fine dancer too." I nodded. The lack of response from me seemed to stump him for a moment. Then he said, "Well, it's time for me to take care of the other guests. It was a pleasure, ma'am." Erin smiled and replied, "Likewise, Plato." I glanced at her. No doubt she had moved too quickly from Mr. G to Plato. I asked, "Impressed with my boss?" "Oh, yes, he's a real charmer." And she gave me a lecherous grin. "Well, let's see whose wife he hooks up with next, huh?" It turned out to be the wife of one of the editors. And over the course of the evening, 3 more. That was a month ago. My name is Donald Lake, no alias. I'm 6 feet tall, weigh 77 pounds, curly brown hair, blue eyes, 30 years old. I'm fit and athletic. Erin's in good shape, too. She's into fencing. It's a sport of skill and coordination. And that's where I met her, at a fencing class she was teaching. I was doing the usual research for Rick, who was to fight on the sword in the next book. In the book, The Adventurer. Before I write an adventure book, I always do extensive research. This is one of my main selling points. Rick doesn't do anything that I haven't tried to do. I worked my way up the steep ladder to writer, graduated from high school, and didn't pursue formal education. Even then, and in fact, from the time I turned 10, I realized I was a writer. Throughout high school, I wrote story after story. 2 stories I wrote in high school were published, albeit in obscure literary magazines. I considered myself a serious writer until I had to work for a living after high school. I worked as an auto mechanic and I loved it, but it didn't pay much. So I started writing thrillers, and, miracle of miracles, one of them sold. And then, another one. And another. My current publisher signed me to a contract after I sent them the first Rick Roker novel. They gave me an editor, Sally Baker. We hit it off right away. She's a sweetheart, but deeply married and had kids in elementary school at the time. It was while working on the second Rocker book that I met Erin. I finished the book after getting advice from her about dueling swords, and we went on a few dates that soon ended in bed. In bed, everything was fantastic. We hit it off right away, and I know both of us were thrilled about it. When we met, Erin was working in her own record store. She wasn't wealthy and was able to survive the initial stages of starting the business thanks to loans from the family trust. One section of the store sold all sorts of instruments, and another section sold recordings of music of all kinds and sheet music. so fencing was just a hobby. When we married, she was 23 years old, and I was as happy as I thought one could ever be. We had plans for children, and in the very near future. But my publishing house was sold to Mr. G, or Plato, as Aaron says. One day, Aaron came home excited. "Donnie, next weekend Plato is inviting us to his island." I stared at her. "You mean Mr. G? How? Why are you telling me this and not him?" "Oh, I ran into him last week. We had lunch, then I gave him a tour of the store. Today he called with an invitation, says he wants to get to know the writers. I'm sure he'll be in touch with you soon." "But my question is, has he been in contact with you? And how many of you has he been in contact with?" She went a little pale. "There was none of that, Donnie. You're being paranoid." "No, not paranoid. Tell me why you didn't mention lunch and going to the store until today. That was last week, wasn't it?" She turned her back. "Okay, Donald. He kind of hit on me. I blew him off. But I didn't say anything because I thought you'd get in trouble. He owns the company. And now you seem to love the idea of visiting him on the island. I've heard of that place. How many other people are going to be there?" "Just you and me. He has a special friend who will be there too, and the staff, of course, all to get to know you better." "I think it's to get to know you, all of you. That's touching. I can handle it." "Are you sure you can handle it?" "Stop it. It's going to be great, you'll see." "I'm going to decline the invitation, Aaron. It's too dangerous for us." "Oh, Donnie, no, please, we're going to have fun." Sighs. "I'm sorry." She sulked the rest of the evening. The next day, I called the main office, asked for Mr. G on the phone, and he called me back 15 minutes later saying, "Hi, Donald. Looking forward to our weekend on the island." "I decline, Mr. G. I don't feel comfortable. My wife seemed to know this, but not me. In fact, she seems to have had lunch with you, but she didn't tell me about it. Said you were hitting on her, and she was afraid I'd react badly if she told me, and she's right. Donald, I actually appreciate Erin on several different levels. She's very attractive, but I can overlook that. She's an entrepreneur like me, and you're one of my most profitable writers. I just want to get to know you both better. I'm sorry, Mr. G. It's not going to work." "I'm sorry you feel that way, Donald. I'd like you to reconsider. I'll keep the weekend open. That was the end of our separation." About 3 hours later, as I was finishing the next Rick book, I got a call from my agent, Brock Levin. "Don, you declined Mr. G's invitation? Why? How do you even know about this, Brock?" "I got a call from the vice president of sales. He insists you have to go." "Otherwise what?" "They might underpromote the new book, which will cost you. And me, since we both live with interest." "Is that what he's threatening?" "Not directly, but he made a threat. This guy plays hardball." I said, I'll be in touch, Brock." After hanging up, I emailed Sally the ending of the new book with some instructions. She called later and we talked it over. In the meantime, I researched Plato Giannis and his island very intensely. The island was called Hedonism. It means pleasure in Greek. An island of pleasure. Diving deeper, I found several stories of sexual outrages on the island, and there was mention of 2 divorce cases that cited the island as the basis. But these stories were printed in the gossip columns. There were several pictures of Mr. G with women. 2 of them were married. I was alarmed by all of this. I found an image of the place on Google Maps, familiarized myself with the entire place. The island is 2 miles long and about 1 mile wide. It is off the coast of North Carolina, among several islands where people go to play golf and do beach vacations. The island faces south and is sheltered from the weather. It has 2 piers and several buildings, including a large house. There are tennis courts and a swimming pool. Why a pool when there are great beaches? I downloaded detailed photos of the place and compiled them into a topographical map. It seemed to me that getting there and back would require a decent boat or seaplane. I don't have either of those things. But I know people who have both. That Friday night, Erin got home on time. Walking into the house, she looked cheerful. I had a big chicken salad and white wine for dinner. She went upstairs to change. While eating, Erin said, "I heard that you may have changed your mind about not going to the island." I looked at her. "How? Plato said you might change your mind." "At lunch?" "No, silly. He's in New York, and we're here in good old Virginia. He called me." "He's got an apartment in McLean. How do you know he's in New York?" "Don't turn your paranoia on me, Donnie. He mentioned it." Said if we said yes, he'd have his plane fly us out of National Airport. But we're not going to say yes, Aaron. I haven't changed my mind. Damn it! Donald Lake, you're so stubborn. Aaron, you can go. I won't have a good time because I'll worry that we'll end up divorced. You're going to sleep with him, right? I'm not going without you, Don. How can you... If I go alone, things could happen. And it will. When you come back, we'll never sleep together again. Donnie, I can't say I'm not attracted to him, but you and I are still hotter than ever. So I wouldn't take that chance. I wouldn't. That's how I believed you. You don't? You don't believe me at all? It's a time when my trust tank is almost empty. She quickly got up from the table, spilling her wine. Damn! Look what you made me do! I started laughing at her. She realized how stupid it sounded and joined me. That turned into hugs and kisses, which turned into a hike upstairs. It took an hour. The unpleasant subject receded. As we lay in bed, Aaron said, I won't risk it for some billionaire, I swear. I noted that she seemed to be assuming that we would go to the island after all. Otherwise, what risk is she talking about? And said, okay, then it's settled. She tensed up, but she didn't say anything. I asked, why do you want to go on this trip so badly? Just the truth, not noodles. She didn't answer for quite a while. Then she said, it seems exciting to be with such an important and powerful guy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean with just the companionship. Aaron, I looked him up. He was born rich. Sure, he made a lot more money on his own, but he had a huge head start. And he chases women like you. Okay, well, I still believe it's going to be good and fun. I thought about it. We were ready to start trying to have kids. If Erin was going to lose her way, now would be a good time for her to do it. And if so, I thought, I'd like to find out right now, not when we had kids. I loved her. She's smart, lively, and sexy as hell. But she also had to be truthful, and right now, I doubted that. Okay, Erin, we can go, but I'm warning you, if you get under this guy, we're screwed. There's no turning back. You understand? Yeah, I understand. I'm so glad we can do this. I've decided that the warning I just gave you is my last. Either she's a worthy wife or she's not. Temptation will be the test. Time will tell. The next day, I accepted the invitation and made arrangements with my friend for emergencies. I also checked for cell phone service on the island. It's there. But just in case, I brought my satellite phone with me. The small plane we flew in from National landed at a small airport where we were met by a black man named Simon. He took us to the dock where we boarded a boat with a nice cabin and a powerful motor. The boat was driven by another guy, Charlie, and after about 40 minutes we docked at the island. Erin and I spent time looking at the ocean and the other islands. Simon told us where we were and outlined the things to do on the island. He's a nice guy, bigger than me and muscular. He has a great smile and laugh. As we approached the dock on the north side of the island, Erin was in the lead, and Simon said, "You don't seem very happy with the trip, Mr. Lake." "Call me Don. I have my doubts. How long have you been working on the island?" 6 years, for Mr. G. "So I expect you know why I'm having doubts. Then why are you here, if you're so concerned?" "To see what happens. You're also his bodyguard, aren't you?" "Yeah, in case anything happens." "Well, he's a big guy. I'm sure he can take care of himself." "Yeah, you could say I'm here just in case. Once or twice things didn't go so well, but I wasn't needed at the time. Looking at you, maybe, I'll be ready. I value my job. Are you armed?" "No. Well, I have a knife, but knives are everywhere. Are there any firearms on the island?" "No, not allowed. I believe that's in the memo you got." "Uh-huh, but I don't really trust it. I'm not a very trusting guy these days. No firearms. I'm warning you, you won't need one no matter what happens." The boat pulled up tight against the dock, and Simon and the young man on the dock tied her up. Simon gave Erin a hand, and I jumped off the boat. Simon looked a little worried about this. I accompanied Erin in the direction of the big house, as Simon had indicated. Mr. G met us as we approached the house. He was dressed casually, wearing swim trunks and a sleeveless shirt. With him was Elle, the most beautiful woman in the world. I looked at her as I recognized who else would be there with us. That's how I found out that she was actually Ellen Johnson from Johnstown. She was a semi-official hostess on the island, and also at several homes owned by Mr. G. There was a time when she could also be seen in the company of other noble men. Not so often anymore. Mr. G seemed to have gotten an exclusive arrangement, at least in some ways. Mr. G held out his hand to shake, and Elle put her arm around Erin. Mr. G then hugged Erin, and Ella hugged me. She smelled and felt great. During the hug, her lips touched my ear. We were taken to a large room and offered drinks. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had a small snack on the airplane. But there was a small buffet set up for us. I declined the drinks and took a sparkling water. Erin took wine. Both of us ate a small amount of food from the buffet. While we were doing that, Mr. G asked me about the new book. I sent it to Sally last week. I guess it was on time. Oh, yes, I know you're always on time, Donald, sometimes even earlier, he smiled. Elle asked, What do you mean? I've read all your books. It's a thriller with rock climbing and flying small airplanes. And a love interest. Elle exclaimed, I can't wait. Maybe I can watch it early. Mr. G encouraged, We'll see, dear, and turned to Erin. My dear, how's the music business going? Mr. G, It's doing great. Maybe I should have said crescendo. Some giggling ensued. I said, I think Marjorie's new book will sell well. Marjorie is Marjorie Wright, who wrote serious fiction but still sold a lot of books. Yes, she's moving up on our sales list. But Donald, she's a long way from you and Morgan. Morgan, under the name Belle Starling, is a romance author. She is the #1 salesperson in our company. Morgan just bakes them, I said mockingly. Mr. G laughed. He does to my advantage. I looked over your contract last week. You owe us another book. Yes, I do. By Christmas, I think. 9 months. But it's already a work in progress. Elle said, You're changing topics? Yes. Sometimes thrillers need a break. That's when I switch. The next book is an English village mystery. I researched it when we were there last summer. Elle said, Plato was very complimentary about your sales. Each book sells better than the last. Erin picked up on that. He's building a readership. For the sake of our future, my store makes a regular profit. Elle said, But you have family money? Yes, I have it. For now, after the store started operating, I don't touch them. Mr. G jumped up. If dinner's over, let's go swimming. And he jumped out the door. Elle said, If you have your bathing suits, I'll show you to your room and you can change. The three of us went upstairs and Elle led us into a large bedroom with a double bed. A suite. She closed the door. We changed into our swimsuits. I had regular swim trunks, but Erin wore a tight pink bikini. I said, That's a bit much, huh? Who are you trying to impress? I just want to look good. Ella is so beautiful. No more so than you, honey. She didn't like my tone, but she held her tongue. When we came downstairs, Ella was in a electric blue bikini as small as Erin's. I was completely in love, in both of them. We got out and walked to the beach on the south side of the island. There was a wooden walkway. Mr. G was already in the water, swimming behind the breakwater. Erin said, I don't want to swim that far. Neither do I. Saying this, Elle shuddered. I dove into the surf, surfaced, and swam to where Mr. G was crawling, cutting the water. I joined him. He was a good swimmer for a man of his build, but my build was more suited for the water, and I kept up with him easily, occasionally changing paddles. I kept swimming until he got tired. He headed back, and I followed him. As we neared the shore, a big wave knocked him down. I walked over to him and picked him up. He was spitting out seawater and sand. I held him firmly and we got out. I saw that his legs felt like wet noodles, probably because he had overexerted himself in the swim competing with me. But he recovered quickly and withdrew from my help. I'm fine. It's just that this wave took me by surprise. We walked over to the women lounging in the sun loungers and I asked, Who wants to swim? Immediately Ella stood up. She raised her arm, causing her top to slip down slightly. Aya! And she ran into the surf. I looked at Erin. She shook her head. Then I ran after Elle. The view from the back was spectacular. She dove into the surf like an Olympian and swam out over the breakwaters. I followed her. She swam better than Mr. G. I was impressed by that. We swam alongside each other for some distance, and she called out, Let's turn around, which she did. The flash of flesh interested me. I let her get about 4 meters ahead of me and watched her from the side. She flipped over and swam on her back. Her breasts jiggled back and forth in the water and on the surface. She was an absolutely stunning woman. Backstroke swimming was my specialty, so I joined her, swimming alongside her. We swam for some distance, and then she said, I've had enough. and swam toward shore. I waited a bit to watch her from behind. When I surfaced out of the surf, I was totally done. Couldn't do anything with her, and I didn't even try. Aaron and Mr. G were nowhere to be seen. But Ella was looking right at my tight-fitting swim trunks. She said, "How can you be like that after swimming like that? What are you, Superman?" I laughed. "There's only one way to find out." She took a step toward me, then stopped, saying, "We can't do this here, as much as I'd like to." She turned and ran. She wasn't as fast on land as she was in the water. I caught up with her easily, and we went out onto the veranda. Ours was nowhere to be seen. I wondered if it had happened already. Ella asked, "So do you really do what you write?" "Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't jump between buildings, but I'm trying to see how plausible it is for Rick to do those things." Elle's staring at me. Before that stare, I was completely lost. But it returned, just as she expected. She was a woman of power. I said, "Elle, back off. I'm married to a wonderful woman, and I'd like to keep it that way. I ask, as a favor, don't." Elle laughed. "Oblique writer, oh dear." I said, "Let's see what those two are up to, shall we? Does it matter to you?" "Oh yeah, please, Elle. I want you to understand that I'm not sleeping with you this weekend. No matter what Aaron decides to do, if it comes down to it, I'll leave. And I'll probably regret what I just said for a long time." I smiled. "I'm warning you, Donald. I'm not easily shaken off my tail." She reached out and stroked my buddy, just once. Then she went into the house. I waited a few minutes before following her. Going upstairs to change, I didn't see anyone. But when I entered our room, the shower was already running. As soon as I heard it, it stopped. There were no voices. Aaron opened the door, wrapped in a towel. She awed when she saw me and asked, "Did Elle get you yet?" "No. Please understand, Aaron, I'm not going with Elle. I hope you're not going with Mr. G either." "We talked about this. The situation remains the same. What did you two do while we were swimming?" He showed me the pool and the tennis court and the gym downstairs. "And no sex?" I didn't believe there could have been because it would have been too risky. They had no idea how long Ella and I would be gone, and I was sure they'd been watching us for a while we swam. "No, he was a gentleman. That's fine. But sooner or later he's going to come after you, and you know it." "Yeah, and she'll come after you. He has as much chance of getting me as she has of getting you." She smirked. "That's not very comforting, but I won't. And you'd better not. Or else what? We've talked before. Nothing's changed. Drinks and appetizers in 5. Now let's have sex." And she dropped the towel. I'll admit, Elle was still on my mind, so I went at Aaron with real passion, and she reciprocated. When we were done, we realized the windows were open. Aaron said, "Well, whatever. After all, we're married." I looked out the window. Sitting in a chaise lounge about 6 meters away from us was Elle. She looked up and smiled, waved, and then reached for her shorts. I stepped away from the window. Aaron noticed I was ready again and stared at me, then looked out the window. For a while, she stood mesmerized. A moaning sound came from outside. Aaron turned to me again, saying, "Jesus, Donnie, forget about yourself. She can have me. You're a goner." "Just because I'm ready doesn't mean I'm going to give up." Aaron laughed at me. "She's the one you should be begging to give up. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance." "I've done it before. It didn't seem to work. I guess Plato gave her the assignment, so he could fuck me. It's all so weird, but you have to admit it keeps you interested." "Aaron, I promise you I won't do that. You've been a big help to me right now, though." She looked at me. I was still horny. "Of course you were. We can sleep every 2 hours. That should help." "It might." She grabbed my tool and said, "Mine," then turned away to get dressed. We went down to the main room in casual clothes. For me, it was Docker shorts and a shirt with a collar. Aaron wore a dress and let her hair down, and high-heel sandals. No doubt she looked sexy. When we arrived, Mr. G was drinking a beer. He said, "Hi, Donald, how was your swim with Ella?" "It was great, Mr. G. She's a talented swimmer. That's just one of the many talents she possesses. Call me Plato." "Okay." Chuckles. "It's a famous name. I like it." "He was a famous guy. My father, rest his soul, loved to read about him." Ella came in. She was wearing a dress, too, and she was wearing heels, too. The dress seemed modest, but it wasn't modest on her. I'm sure Aaron was feeling a little insecure, and, as I realized, that was part of the game. Elle was supposed to outshine Aaron, who in turn would try to assert herself by getting herself Plato. I moved over to Erin and put my arm around her shoulders. Plato said, "There's wine, cocktails, beer, and some pretzels. Pretzels are my favorite." Saying this, he ate one of them. For a while, the four of us chatted. Then Elle took me to show me the house. It was impressive. The gym is great equipment. I asked, "Does Plato use it?" "He lifts weights." She pointed to a bench where a barbell was set up. "It's heavy." I slid onto the bench under the barbell. I carefully took it off the racks and did 5 reps, then put it back down. Elle stood right above me, staring at me the way she knows how, and afterward said, "He only does 3. Then he rests." She was breathing hard. I picked up the barbell and did 8 more reps. Then I put her back down and said, "Everyone has their strengths, and you have so many. You know what my role should be this weekend? Seduce me so Plato can fuck Erin?" "Yeah, it's happened before. I always get the job done, even if it's usually not very pleasant. But you're gonna be more than pleasant, I think." She gave me a killer smile. "If I beg you, will you stop?" I was actually being serious when I said that, but she seemed to think I was joking. "No, but I'd enjoy seeing you beg." She wandered up the stairs. I waited for my excitement to subside and then went up. The 3 of them huddled together in the living room and talked. When I walked in, they fell silent. Then Plato said, "Have a drink, Donald. A beer, maybe?" I looked at the bar, walked over to it, pulled out an unopened bottle of Corona and opened it. The others had wine. We chatted some more. Then I asked, "Are you finished discussing your plot, or should I get out?" This caused an awkward silence. Elle silently watched the other 2, mostly Erin. Erin looked at Plato, and the latter said, "So no secrets." "Iya." At that moment, Simon walked in and announced dinner. We made our way to the dining room where the food was spread out on a buffet. It was a family form of service. We sat at one end of a large table. Water was poured, but I drank my beer and didn't drink the water. The interruption eased the tense situation I had created, and we chatted amicably about politics and baseball. Plato was a Yankees fan. Erin and I were Orioles and Nationals fans. Elle liked the Pirates. She was originally from Johnstown. Simon served dessert, tiramisu. I missed mine. Plato seemed to notice that. "Not eating dessert? That's great. I have to keep my waistline in check." "Bah, you have no body fat. I saw it when you were swimming. You don't drink water, only beer." "Plato, as I told my wife before we came here, my confidence tank is empty. Can you blame me?" Erin said. "Do you believe they're going to drug you? That's just crazy." "Don't be like that, Donald." I smiled, slid Plato a glass of water and a tiramisu. "Eat and drink, buddy." Plato sat stone-faced. Then he said, "Simon." When Simon appeared, Plato said, "Please clear the table." Simon saw what had happened to the arrangement of water and dessert. He picked up what had been my water glass and the uneaten tiramisu and carried them away. Elle said, "Let's go to the patio. There will be music there and we can dance." Erin and Plato remained silent. I stood up and gave Elle my hand, walked her to the patio. When we got there, she turned to me. "You really blamed him about the food and water? Do you really believe he'd slip you drugs? Do you?" "Maybe. I wouldn't have thought so, but he didn't take either of them." "So he asked his boyfriend to take them away. The other 2 came out, and soft music started playing. I walked over to Erin, took her by the elbow, and led her away from Plato to the open area. We danced. She usually dances well, but she was stiff at first. Afterward, though, she relaxed. She snuggled up to me and whispered in my ear, "I love you, Donnie, always. I love you too, Erin." We danced on. The music ended and we sat down at a table with Plato and Elle. Just then the music started up again and Elle came up, holding out her hand to me. She led me out onto the floor. We danced. I saw Plato dancing with Erin. Elle may have been the world's best distraction. With her sweet, subtle scent and the curves of her body, she put me into some kind of trance. Every time she worked on me, I was immediately enthralled, and this time too. I could see Plato's hands on Erin's ass, and I didn't see her push them away. I pulled away from Ella, covered the short distance to Erin and Plato, and just stood there looking at them. Erin saw and tried to move away from Plato. The same continued to keep his hands on her ass. She poked him lightly in the chest and said, "I don't want any trouble, Plato. Let go." He let go, but took her hand and led her back to the table. Elle came back after me and we sat down. She was very close to me. Aaron held Plato's hand as they sat next to each other. Plato said, "I'm very disappointed in you, Donald. Elle is a fantastic lover. She will give you one of the most powerful and delightful experiences of your life. And yet, you're denying her that chance. I have a wife, no trading, and that's how we got to the point we were talking about in the beginning." I turned to Aaron and said, "It's either him or me. No in-between options." She took her hand off his arm, but looked at me and said, "It's just for the weekend. It'll be back to normal on Monday. Can't you have fun with Ellie in the meantime?" I gave her a hard look. "And you do that? No kidding, yes or no, even if it means it's over between us?" "No, I don't see why it has to mean that, but, I won't." I held out my hand to her and she took it. I pulled her to me and gave her the hottest kiss I was capable of, stroking my hands up and down her body. And then I pulled away. My tears came out. I breathed out words that nearly killed me. "The mere fact that you would fuck this guy means it's over between us. It's over between us." I turned and walked towards the stairs. She screamed, "No, Donnie, no!" I got to the top of the stairs, grabbed my bag that I had packed before, and went out the back fire escape. I made the call and, sobbing, ran into the darkness. As I ran, I could still hear the screams. About 20 minutes later, I heard an airplane. It had landed near the south dock and came toward me. My buddy Todd Jacobs was flying it. I was walking toward him when Plato and Simon appeared behind me. Plato shouted, "Oh, no, you asshole. You can't run away. You have to stay here and calm your wife down." He lunged at me. I was already on the dock. Plato was out of control and unable to fight. Simon was holding back, probably because Todd had a gun pointed at him. I threw Plato into the water. He was floundering there, screaming, "You're fired, asshole! You hear me? You're fired!" I got in the plane and Todd took off. We flew to a small lake near Dulles. He had a car there for me. I paid him for his favor and drove home to Alexandria. The road was dark and lonely. Our house was dark, too. I walked into it, looked around. Pictures of us in happier times, pictures of our family members. I was overwhelmed and just sat in a chair, staring into the void. That's how I fell asleep. At 8 in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a car outside. I looked out and saw Erin getting out of some rental car. She carried her bag to the door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. I stood looking at her, and she stood motionless, looking at me. She looked terrible. Probably no better than I did. She said, "I've never shit myself like that in my whole life, and I never will again. Never again. I don't want to lose you, Donnie." I shrugged. "Aaron, well, what did you think was going to happen when you decided to let Plato fuck you? Did you think I'd be able to overlook it because of Elle? I was stupid, Donnie. So stupid. So tell me, did you and Plato set this whole thing up?" She looked down. "Not exactly. He suggested that when we got there might be a switch, and to be honest, I saw it coming. I thought I'd say no, and that would be the end of it. But you didn't say no. You said yes. Only if you go with Elle. I saw how much you wanted her. You were ready when you were with her. And after? You think we'd have remarried, had kids and all that? When I would have known. When we both knew we couldn't trust each other. I, saw it as an interlude. When we'd both have an exceptional experience." I smiled. "I can understand why you thought my experience with Elle would be top-notch. But why did you think Plato would be better than me?" He turned me on. He's older and stronger. He knew what to do to get me, I guess. I never thought he'd be better than you. Just different. "So, Aaron, how do I know it won't happen again? There's still plenty of guys like Plato in the world, and he's still around." "I wasn't going to cheat, Donnie. It was right in front of you. I just thought that you would say yes. Now, well, I mean, you turned her down, so I know you never would have said yes if you'd turned her down." "Yeah?" "Well, I don't know. To me, you're not the woman I met and married. She wouldn't have made a move to get screwed by some other guy." "Donnie, can we please, can we see what happens next? And you know, we've always had great sex. We both miss it. We can keep it up while you spend your time not trusting me." She stood up and took off all her clothes. I thought about turning away, but I didn't. She led me upstairs. The one thing we'd always had, and probably always would have, was total sexual compatibility. Barely in bed, we always come together. So I let her come home. 10 years later. I was picking up the kids from the school bus. It was 3:15. Jessica is 8 and Robert is 6. Ellen, who is not yet in school, is 3. I was a stay-at-home writer, but I had a good woman coming to help, and I had the opportunity to write. It took over a year before I trusted Erin enough to let her go off the pill, but when she did, our sex life took off. The thought of me knocking her up turned us on in a big way. I closed my contract with my old publisher. Sally and I moved on to another. The first book I wrote was about an adventure on an island. It was close to the truth. Well, as it happens, I had to hang from the float of an airplane there before I could board it, after I'd beaten Simon and his minions. Well, also, the character's wife was drugged to want the villain. But the villain was dumped in the ocean and everything. The book sold a huge amount of copies, and I got a movie contract that also included my 3 previous books. Plato couldn't complain about the half-truths in the new book, where he was cast as Socrates. If he did, he would be burdened with the truth of what happened. Erin has 2 stores now. They make a little money. I make a lot. Before I fully accepted her back, she signed a post-nuptial agreement. It covers both of us. No infidelity. Now the school year has started, and as I was corralling the older 2 home, a car pulled up in our driveway. It was a little red sports model. A prominent pair of legs emerged from it, followed by the rest of the most beautiful woman in the world. Ellen smiled and waved to the children. They ran up to her, shouting, "Aunt Ellen! Aunt Ellen!" She hugged them and began to fuss around them. Young Ellen greeted her at the door as she entered the house. I poured her a seltzer, her favorite drink, and told her, "Erin will be here soon. I made a caloric salad, and your room is all set. But that's another story."